topic of what predictive analytics is all about, how it's being used to better and differently understand the consumer. We have with us Alexa DuPont-Bell. She's the VP of Strategic Development for RecycleBank. Alexa has a strong background in ad tech. She studied investments of the sector at RRE Ventures, and then before that was doing business development for Gold Pocket Wireless. You could say that currently she's very much involved in managing future behaviors at RecycleBank, which is a company that works with brands in their dual mission, not only to get their brands out there, but also to incentivize eco-smart activity. Please welcome Alexa DuPont-Bell.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, everyone. I apologize, Steve, for our delay. We were really having a scintillating conversation right outside those doors, so hopefully we can just continue it right here. Yeah, absolutely. We're just warming up. So we're warmed up, we're ready to go, and we're really looking forward to this panel today. A couple things, Killian. Should we
this dude is moving this podium, so I think we're going to be all right.
I think one of our handsomest panelists is going to reveal his face momentarily. We all just met.
Can I come back next year?
But it's my pleasure to be moderating this panel today. I thought that the word creepy in the description was a perfect challenge for us. Our objective, among many things today, is going to be hopefully to really dig into why consumers think it's creepy and what the consumer value proposition can be, so that we can really show the benefits of data, not just to the people who are buying it and using it, but to the people who can benefit from it. You know, the word valet was tossed out, and I think it's interesting to explore what we can do online and offline with data. So, the format will be really, really quick intros, and then we'll sink into the meat of it, and definitely leave a lot of time at the end for questions and continued dialogue. So if each of you could just introduce yourself, say where you're from, and maybe one interesting thing about, what you think about data, and then we'll pop along.
Wow, one interesting thing I think about data. Chris Hansen, president of Net Mining. We are a audience targeting network that profiles, scores, and targets users in real time. I don't have anything interesting to talk about data.
Okay, well, he has plenty interesting to come. But your perspective, I mean, when you guys are, net mining real-time data, do you find yourself the hero in meetings? Do you find yourself struggling to deliver value in new ways?
No, we were talking about this outside. I think to a marketer, hero, I think maybe is hyperbole, but I think we definitely provide value to a marketer. Definitely with the people that we work with in the industry, I think we provide value. As we were talking about it, maybe to the end consumer, I think that's kind of where we need to go is how do we get in front of the user who's actually seeing the ad and provide perceived value to them. I don't think we've done a good job as an industry. I wouldn't say that we've done a good job with it, and it's something that I think we need to focus on. I'm sure we'll talk about a lot.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot.
Hi, Joshua Karan, VP of Product Research and Data Monetization for AT&T AdWorks. AdWorks helps national brands connect with their audiences. And I guess my one interesting thing about data is if you torture it long enough, it will confess to anything you want it to say.
Hi, Duncan McCall, CEO of a company called PlaceIQ. We actually profile locations, and we're pretty focused in mobile targeting right now. I think when I look at data, sort of interesting nexus of the times right now, I think there's going to be a shift pretty soon, I hope, in terms of, people in this room are thinking about data, but I'd love to see how the consumers themselves can think about their data, think about being empowered with all the data that passes through them. And I'd like to see products and services and platforms to do that, because I think once we get the consumers really bought in on this, the world's going to change.
And I'm Rachel Pasqua. I'm Executive Director of Mobile for Organic. We're a digital marketing agency. We have the distinction of being one of the first digital marketing agencies in the business. But by nature of my title, my job touches many things throughout the organization, and there's a mobile aspect to everything that a brand does as a brand, so there's a mobile aspect to everything we do as an agency. Analytics being, of course, an important part of that, analytics and data. But if you boil down my job to its most essential elements, I'm responsible for making sure that our brands are, accessible and useful and usable and relevant to their customers in the right place, in the right time, on the right platforms, on the platforms that matter to their customers. So creating those types of contextual experiences, portable experiences, data and analytics are a very important part of helping us understand what those are and what they should be.
Great.
I'm Killian Schaefer. I'm Strategy Director at Kramer Krasselt. We're either the second or the largest independent in the U.S. We've got Chicago, New York, some other places. So in CRM, I am responsible for analytics, making sure that we have sort of bespoke messaging, but this is less about targeting people than it is about using the information that they share with us to give them a better experience with the brand. And I guess as far as data goes, I am really interested in data liberation coming off of what you said. Once consumers start realizing that their data is valuable, I'm really interested to see what the ecosystem is going to look like once we start to figure out some exchanges where people will raise their hand and say, you can use my information, feel free to market to me. I think that's going to be interesting.
Great. So actually, that's a perfect tee up. I mean, we were just talking about this, so we really will continue our conversation. And this sort of consumer perception and what are, if they ever do embrace and become hand raisers in the data game, what experiences do we think will push them over the edge? And one thing that has come up is the idea of a valet. And in the prep call, we spoke a bit about, Killian, sort of some of the work you've done for clients. Can you give some case studies that I think show good examples of this user experience?
Yeah, so when you say predictive analytics, most people are thinking algorithms, so I'm not going to go that far, although I can give you an example of something we have done with algorithms. But a great example, and we just refer to it as reciprocity marketing. So the more somebody shares, the more information that they share with a brand, the more open they are to having that information used to their benefit. So in the example, Porsche is one of our clients, and so you can go on Porsche's website and you can share your email address, and that's all. You could share your PII with Porsche, and that means something else because then we can do something with that data. Everybody here knows we can bump that up against Experian or whatever. But what's interesting is that you can also show your interests in things like when you're planning to buy, what type of vehicle you're coming out of, that sort of thing, in addition to other experiences. So you might know that you can go with Porsche and go over and have a racetrack experience. So what we'll do is figure out people's interest with the brand and be able to have an experience that really works for them. So we're not going to be sending out, come to the Porsche racetrack in Joliet, Illinois, outside of Chicago, because we know that you're 6 months out from buying a really sweet 911, and we'd love it if you drove one. So, I mean, it's a brand message and it's a sales message, but it's an experience. And we hear back from people that they appreciate, knowing that they're interested in that.
Cool, that's helpful. Can you sort of apply that to, do you think that net mining could help make those sort of valet services for different brands?
Absolutely. I think auto is a great example. So we're not collecting PII in the role that we have in the ecosystem. And we're not taking data that somebody's saying, oh, I want to test drive a 911, but we're taking implied data. If they're going to navigate around, we'll use Porsche, say Audi's website, client of ours, if they're looking at an A8 versus an S4 versus a TT, we can take those implied behaviors, how long they've spent on it, and whether they customized the model, whether they've said, oh, I would like to test drive it, get some information in the mail. We can take those sort of implied behaviors and then create messaging that we're going to go off of Audi's website and get in front of the user. So if you do show that and raise your hand and say, I like the A8, we can craft a message to the user when they're on a different website and say, come and test drive the A8, not show them an A4, not show them a TT, not show them something that they haven't shown interest in. And I think auto is a great example of how you can do that very well. Retail as well. Retail, auto, I think travel. There's lots of ways in which you can collect the data, infer, and predict whether they're interested in something and then create a message, a very tailored message to the person. Is that creating a valet? Maybe it's the first step in doing that. I think it's kind of, maybe the sophomore stage of it. There's a lot more I think we could be doing working with the brands.
I think it's interesting to think of that balance between the hand raisers, so people who have given you this information or who have actually sought out a destination site about a car and, you know, clicked around it, and people who might have just come across something, you know, you're on Amazon or you see some certain product and then it continually retargets you, you know, and trying to figure out how best to use that data for the non-hand raisers and make them discover a valet experience, I think is compelling. Do you think that does anyone have an opinion on how it might vary based on sort of category or audience? You know, we've come out of the gate with 2 car examples, and have you seen any impact of ROI depending on the receptivity of audience types?
Yeah, I mean, I can give an example that's sort of pertinent to our business. So, you know, I think in the blurb for this panel, you talked about the concept of can you go beyond intenders, right? So Google is a classic. They hold all the intenders, right? People search for. They have mobile search terms for people searching for fast food. They say, okay, I got an intender for fast food. That's great. So what we're able to do, we look at the location signals, so we basically profile locations. We look at the location signals, the attributes of that location, what people are talking about. But as you're saying, the likely behavior of somebody, and we can now say, well, if somebody's coming out, you know, to use a crude example, somebody's coming out of a bar 11:30 at night in a big city, they may not search for fast food. However, understanding the context of their location, we might want to offer them an ad for fast food because we think they're a good intender. And 2 blocks away, where somebody's in a gym or is in a residence, we may decide not to show them that ad because we understand, based upon their behavior and those attributes, without knowing who they are, they're less likely to be an intender. So that would be a very, very high-level example of some of the things we're doing to be able to say, you know, you don't have to be raising your hand, you don't have to be searching for intent, but looking at other signals, other behaviors that are privacy-friendly can be very important elements to be able to target to people in a meaningful, and we've proven that works as well, in a meaningful, performant fashion.
Okay, so I didn't know if you looked like you were going to say something.
No,
You sort of gestured.
you can tell so much by device and location.
Right.
You know, and obviously location, it can be volunteered sort of unwittingly via search, or wittingly via, you know, you go to a website and it asks to detect your location, and then you get an experience based on that. I mean, just that alone, platforms and location tell us so much about where you are, both, you know, physically in terms of geo-coordinates, but also sort of metaphorically, if you will, in terms of your whole customer journey. I mean, for example, to go back to the automotive experience, shouldn't the experience that I get when I'm clicking on, say, a banner ad, when I'm nowhere near a lot for a particular automotive brand, I'm nowhere near the lot, I just happen to click on this banner ad that I see in a game or on a website, the experience that takes me to, you can infer from that I'm probably at the beginning of my my sort of introduction to that brand. The experience that I get when I go to the site when I'm actually on the lot should be something much different. Obviously, if you've gotten me to the lot, I'm much further down the road to becoming a customer, and the content that I get accordingly should be much more streamlined to where I am at that place and time.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting to tie in the use of location and then thinking about what channels are best to access them. So you're sort of talking about people who are using smartphones, obviously, I think, and a lot. Yeah. But there's also, you know, the good old-fashioned out-of-home placements, where as we learn more about consumers who are in those areas, and Place IQ is looking at sort of, you know, what a block is composed of. Does it have a nightclub? Does it have certain families? And so is the easiest ROI just getting people with smartphones, or are there ways that we can tie in out-of-home media to drive value? Does anyone have examples of other channels or combining the channels?
Don't want to monopolize very quickly. So we actually did put together a proposal for a very large auto with a big client. So looking at location as the way to find audience across in-home TV, because certain cable properties are effectively location aware, not very granular. You think of in-home online, because GeoIP is getting far more accurate and is about to get very, very accurate. You think you go home and you connect to Comcast or Fios. Fios sends you a range of IP addresses, and they know your home address because they send you a bill every month. Or you walk home with a smartphone that connects to your IP address and knows where it is. That data is becoming more freely available. You start to think of mobile, in-home. you start to think of digital out of home, be it analog or so we've already done some early pilots there in terms of finding audience not just in mobile but across different platforms and using location as the way. We're all physical beings, we move through the physical world, and you see different mediums and messages as you do that.
That's creepy.
So how can we make them not think it's creepy? I mean, this gets to the root of all this data we could have. I mean, I guess my first question would be, how many people are using that? So you just painted a picture of really a tremendous volume of personally, and not I personal, but data about that being in that location from your cable provider. But what percentage of advertisers do you think are really tapping into this opportunity?
Well, we're very small. We're a startup, right? We're early stage. So I think mobile's great because if you want to reach people who are interested in golf, as you're alluding to, on a mobile device, you can reach them as they're waiting to tee off or as they're on their way or et cetera. You can't do that online so much, whereas now you've got cookies. But I think so we've already run campaigns online. We haven't talked about them publicly. We're already working with companies to help out-of-home billboard placement. And I think, it is increasingly becoming obvious that as you connect to the internet, the cloud, whatever you want to call it, the chances are, whether it's a tablet, smartphone, IPTV in the future, digital out-of-home, it's location aware. And I think, one quick point, so just to get past the creepy comment, so we're not looking at, there's no PII. So we're inferring the likely behaviors based upon either public information or shared information. So I also think it's not the idea, it's not like the target, the target example of we know your profile history. It's showing you a slightly relevant slightly relevant ad based upon the context of your location. It's not going to revolutionize this one-to-one, we know exactly who you are. It's degrees of performance better than what we've got now.
Okay.
I think it's interesting what you were saying in the beginning, at what point, personally, I think from observing the whole ecosystem that location and mobile is either is now or will be the tipping point for the industry, because people like us, we're very aware that our data is always being collected. Every time I go into a store and they ask me for my email address, I think, oh, you're trying to collect my data. Or I see banner ads on my desktop that target me based on something I looked at yesterday, and I think, oh, creepy, you're taking my data, you're stealing my data. But
do you give it?
Do I do it?
Yeah, do you give it?
Do I give it? I have to say when I'm verbally asked, no, because I'm usually in a hurry, but that's a whole other story, is the ease of volunteering your data.
Yeah.
But I think that the interesting thing about mobile, one of the many interesting things about mobile, is that it's training us to opt in, Google would like to detect your location, brand X would like to detect your location. And we're getting trained with the idea that if I give you my location, I'm going to get some useful info. And I'd like to think that it's going to be, some that's baby steps towards maybe more preference-based offering of your data, because, they're going to get your data whether you like it or not. Advertising is a fact of life. They're going to get your data. We know that. Does the general populace know that? I think that they're going to be catching on slowly but surely.
But I think that's where the platform is important. If your cable box, which is a computer, is sending information to Time Warner, to Fios, and you have a $200 cable bill every month, it's like, well, wait a second, I'm paying $200 for the service. Now they're taking my information and they're using it to target me with ads. I think that's where consumers probably, whether they understand that they have a computer on top of their TV, or on top of, it's flat screens, next to their TV, that it's actually sending information out for the purpose of targeting ads. I think that, whether they understand it or not, is something that they'd have a hard time with. Whereas if you go to a website that's free, you go visit a website that has content on it, and you get delivered an ad, there's almost, whether they understand how the ad's being delivered or not, they understand the concept of cookies, they understand the concept of predictive modeling, they understand this is free content, I'm getting it, and there is something, I'm not saying it's a great value prop in their mind necessarily, but there is some sort of value in it. And I think that's where mobile and cable, it'll be interesting to see how people react to that versus reacting to, going to a website. And you could say, well, I paid $30 a month to get internet service, but I think they understand that content has value. And in the Fios or Time Warner example, I think it's going to be harder to do that. Or even, AT&T, no offense to AT&T, or Verizon, I think it's harder there too, because your cable bill is going to be $100. Your phone bill is going to be $100 a month.
I think we're dancing around two different types of data. One is the declared, user-generated, raise the hand, and specify what you're interested in, which, for all of the interest in this room, even people who are avid Facebook lovers, I'm sure they don't have all of their interests constantly updated, constantly in real time, every type of, meal that you're interested in eating. It's just too much effort, right? The other form of this data is the digital exhaust that we've talked about, and all of this passively collected information that can be used for the benefit of consumers. Now, that benefit isn't always as clear-cut as, if you give me your location, I will give you a coupon at a location near you, right? That's a nice, clear, easy to understand example. But to your point, Chris, about the subsidization of a diversity of free content out there that we get on the web, that's a indirect benefit of the use of this data. So I think that you're right, we do need to educate consumers that there is this benefit to be gleaned from this use of the information, and the distinction between the PII, creepy association of information with your identity and the more benign use of this information in an anonymous or aggregate way. Because when I do a stock transaction, right, on the NASDAQ, that stock transaction is very personal. I don't want that broadcast around the world. But I can't opt out of that transaction being aggregated with everyone else's transactions to generate this public good, right? And I think as people who participate in marketplaces, we want to know what's the value that someone else paid for this particular commodity.
I think if you take, just to take a sort of, the classic cliche, if you take one set of that data, the purchase data, so the data that lots of companies now are aggregating up and making sense out of, you throw back 40, 50 years to database marketing, and for a long time, let's just take the evolution of credit cards, and as everybody knows, when you go into a merchant or the credit card company, they sell that data back almost immediately, and it goes into some gigantic database. We've already mentioned the New York Times example. It goes into some gigantic database, and theoretically, there's a massive industry that sells that data to the junk mailers to show you more, allegedly more targeted ads. Isn't part of what we're talking about? It's just a technology shift of that. Now, as you allude to quite correctly, there's multiple new sources of data, and people are volunteering through digital exhausts as well as inferred volunteering, additional data on top of that. But your behavior data, we've had that for 40, 50 years. This is pretty much the same stuff. It just happens to be digital. So the way we use that, to my mind, it's no different than the way that you use credit card transactions. And when you sign up for that credit card, I don't see an opt-out box that says, please do not sell my credit card information. Maybe there's one. I don't read the agreements. But so part of me is like, well, this has already been happening. So,
so just as an adjunct to that, so if you want to start talking about getting really creepy, what we could do a couple months ago, we had MasterCard or people from MasterCard come in, and at an anonymous level, they could tell us all purchase data. I mean, who has more purchase data than MasterCard? So what they were offering to us was this whole
Visa.
Well done. But what we could have done is aggregate all of that and start to create, by tagging up with the kind of digital trails that people leave, starting to make inferences about the type of people that are buyers. And we started to see the power of this really quickly, and our agency started to rally around it to think, what could we do with it? And as we were thinking, what could we do, MasterCard found out that this wasn't such a good idea. So, I mean, I think there's an extent to which we're all a little bit hesitant in terms of this anonymous data, because we know we have the possibility of linking it up.
But a counterexample on that one point is bundle.com, which is the aggregation of all the consumer purchase activity grouped to geolocations. Yep. So you can say in this particular area of the country, this is the wallet spend on gas versus retail versus restaurants, et cetera, which can be used for better marketing. It could be used for just general research.
So
is that at a geographic level, or is it at a demo sort of cut level?
So they have a deal. They are spun out of Citibank. So they have all the Citibank data, basically. So every category
Right.
size, et cetera, by merchant, by consumer, but they obviously wouldn't expose the consumer. So what you're alluding to, we're already doing that at a high level. Now, we don't have MasterCard data or Visa data for obvious reasons, but we do have lots of aggregate retail data. And you can start to imagine, so imagine no PII, but I could say, well, hey, there's a U2 concert going on here, and there's a Justin Bieber concert going on here. let's look how the retail patterns are affected when these concerts let out, right? These guys are all buying steaks. These people are all buying Mayberry, frozen yogurt, or whatever silly example you like. Right. So, and then let's look on top of that. What social signals? What are people searching for? What ads are they clicking on? What audiences? What can I learn from those different audiences based upon the demographic of those events in terms of what types of ads they've converted? So when I show those audience an ad in the future, it's something slightly more relevant. I mean. Right. The future's here, right? Well, we've been doing this for a year and a half. Now we're not doing everything we'd like to do, and we're treading carefully, but all this data is out here. And I think the thing I always talk about, people talk about privacy, and I think privacy is something to be taken very, very seriously. But I also think, geez, how many people have been axe murdered because we had a slightly more targeted ad? If you read Al Franken's, yeah, I mean seriously, right? So if you read Al Franken's bill about why we should ban GPS devices, if you actually download it and read the bill, the reason, his fundamental justification is GPS stalking, and you actually read the first paragraph, and he has to state, last year 5 people were GPS stalked in the United States. It's an endemic problem. 5 crazy boyfriends installed Google Attitude on the girlfriend's phone. It's true. The entire bill that rocked the industry was based upon Al Franken saying this is a problem when it wasn't a problem. So I sometimes think if you take the emotion out of it, you take the Wall Street Journal articles out of it and say, what are we really talking about here? Sometimes I think, there's a lot of spin, right?
I don't think people disagree with you. I think that it's just the sort of like, trust me, I'm going to use your personal data for good use or for a beneficial use. If the consumers don't see that beneficial use, there's a little bit of pushback. One thing that we do that I think
but is the consumer really pushing back? Has anybody in the street said to you, we work in the mobile industry, God, you're stealing my data? I mean,
I wonder how many people who are not us actually are aware of this.
Well,
because we're a room full of people who understand that this is going on. Yeah. How much, I don't know. How much does the general populace really know?
So I was actually thinking as we were talking about having a meme where it's like, this is what my wife thinks I do. This is what the industry thinks I do. This is what I think I do. This is what I actually do. But my wife has no clue as to what I do. I mean, it's laughable. Everybody probably has a similar situation. Like they don't really fundamentally understand what we do as an industry. She's not in the industry. But we were looking for an apartment, and she went to a website, a condo that was being built. And the next day, she got hit with an ad from that condo. And she looked at me and she said, this is the weirdest thing. They actually knew that I was looking for a condo, for this particular condo. And I looked at her and I said, that's exactly what I do for a living. Like, that is my job. Like, you finally now realize what I do, and I've been doing for years. She didn't understand it, and frankly, it did kind of creep her out. It's the idea that I went to a website, they did something, they tracked me somehow, and I got this ad, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, great, it worked. And she looked at it as, well, that's a little bit weird. How do they know that? And I think that's where that's where the problem is there's just lack of understanding.
Yeah, I think that's the huge opportunity, right? Is not only to educate, but to give people a reason as to why that would be a good thing. Why should that be meaningful? And as an industry, another cliche, right? We've done a very, very poor job of doing that.
Yeah, Google is trying to do. Google can do it because they're Google, and it's not because they have the money. We were talking about this earlier. It's not because they have the money, it's because they have the brand cachet. If you go on a subway, you see, here's why it's important that you do this, or here's why we're doing that. I think they're trying to do a pretty good job of educating in very simple language with cartoons and do it in a way that only Google can do because of the sort of name recognition. If net mining did an ad like that, people are like, what the hell is net mining? I think they're trying. I think as an industry, we have to try harder. Now, the icons, the DAA icons, those help a little bit. The actual amount of people who click on them to find out why they're getting targeted with an ad is minuscule. But at least that's a step in the right direction. But again, they're baby steps. I think we just need to be educating people, like my wife.
I think it's a good anecdote, and I don't think it necessarily completely obliterates your comment, Rachel, right? Which is that this could be a bit of a mountain out of a molehill, but I do think that the other side of the coin is, as consumers are encountering these interesting things that happen across the internet, we have an opportunity as an industry to either allow sort of creepy stories to come out, or just explain why they make sense. And I was talking to Chris, say to your wife, and when you go back to J. Crew, what you're shopping but didn't buy is conveniently there in the right size and the right color in your cart. So there's, technologies online that sort of help support that. And I think that if the outcome, we talked about couponing, for example, is, targeting someone with a coupon for what they wanted to buy at the right time. That's a financial reward. At RecycleBank, we're rewarding consumers for mainstream green actions, and sometimes it's just a status symbol. We can show you data that's hard for you to collect otherwise. Your family recycled 200 more pounds this year and saved it from landfill. That's something that's data people potentially want to brag about on their Facebook page, et cetera. So using data as a status symbol or using data to generate a cash value reward, I think is interesting. You were emailing me about an example in terms of targeting moms with coupons for back to school. This may or may not be a relevant time, but you were sort of, is that an experience that could be targeted that she'd really benefit from and would help her understand?
Sure, I don't see why not. You're going to see ads. Right. And I think maybe that's something, maybe like your wife doesn't, or your average consumer doesn't like to be shocked out of their banner blindness, because we know we don't notice 90% of what we see, or 95, or whatever that random number is. And the reason we don't notice most of it is because it's irrelevant, because most advertising's not very targeted. But
that's a weak value prop. I agree with you, and it's kind of the value prop we use, but it's unfortunately a weak one. It's like you got to educate them. Well, here's the reason why we do it, and you see a targeted ad, and they're like, okay, great. Again, ads, people don't necessarily want to see them. It's great that they're targeted, and it does provide some value, but I think it's hard for someone like my wife to understand that.
No, I would absolutely agree that the share your data to get better targeted ads is not a great value prop to a consumer.
Well, no, because nobody wants ads. That's like asking someone if they want a tetanus shot. Like, no one's going to say, yes, give me more advertising. Yay, it's going to be more relevant to my needs as a consumer. They don't know that. They don't know they're in the purchase funnel. They don't know what stage of the customer journey they're on. Personally, when I'm not being digital strategy person, I'm a housewife, and I want to get the information or the product or the whatever it is that I need faster, easier, cheaper, in the right size, at the closest store. Anything you can do to make my life easier makes me like you more as your customer. So saying to them, hey, you're going to get better ads, that's going to be meaningless. But maybe showing them, or just, driving towards creating an overall more positive, more relevant experience for each particular customer, less of a one-size-fits-all mentality.
Well, that's a publisher benefit, right? To customize the website based on previous activities on that website or elsewhere. But going back to our credit card example, you could imagine even doing geographic recommendations. So based on my purchase patterns where I live, when I go to a new city, recommending restaurants of people who have frequented the restaurants based where I live when they also visited the same town. So there can be these additional benefits, but it's not a one-for-one, this is the one benefit you'll get from sharing this one bit of data. And I think we have to move away from that exact exchange type mentality to there are numerous benefits that will emerge. Many of them we don't even know today, like this example.
I think that's a great point, right? So this is what, kind of what I was alluding to at the beginning in terms of coming back to if we really want to create a meaningful consumer value proposition, we've got to start to say let's fundamentally think about reinventing the value prop and advertising itself. Let's not show somebody an ad if we don't have something meaningful to show them. And we think mobile's a great platform to potentially do this. Device you have with you all the time, it's location aware. So we're working with some big customers now and saying, wait, so why do you show a house ad again? Why don't you stop showing people house ads and actually wait, and your app, you own your app, you sell your own advertising, this particular big customer, and actually use our data and your existing data to only show somebody an ad when you have something meaningful. That's just we're back to ads, but just one piece to start to say, let's start to build up a series of products and services around the fact you're sharing this data, be very transparent, educate, and advertising is only one piece, but customer recommendations, maybe it's your data usage, your patterns, integrating it with the Mint style. So I think that kind of innovation is what is desperately needed to be able to move the industry forward in the consumer's eyes.
Yeah. Just a follow-on point there, the difference between personalization and advertising is really just what are we optimizing for? It's the exact same technology. We're collecting data to make some content decision to a consumer, And if it's optimizing for the happiness of the consumer, we call it personalization. If it's optimizing for the happiness of an advertiser, we call it advertising. But it's the same process, and most people are not creeped out by personalization.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think you think the dream of one-to-one marketing, I don't think any consumer will deny that. We've never really had it. And I think there's been a lack of innovation in getting us there. And we have all the data and devices and mechanisms to do it now. So, yeah, I absolutely agree.
So maybe the answer to educating the user, the end consumer, is educate the publishers to not keep hitting people over the head with ads. So minimize the ads, which is something that's going to be very hard to break that habit.
Absolutely.
It's a habit that it's been ingrained in them. So that's number one. And then maybe on the market.
Isn't that how they make money?
I was going to say, it's going to be hard, right?
But that said, I mean, if you're making a 30-cent CPM off of something that has no relevance, when you could save that impression because it's not going to make or break your month, and then maybe the ads that you do deliver, because now you have a smaller supply, you can charge more for. I think that's a virtuous cycle that could work really well for the industry. But then also educate the marketers. I think when it comes to providing value, I think the challenge you have is the actual ad that you're displaying. And maybe it's as simple as, I'm going to serve you a targeted ad, and maybe it's an ad where the J. Crew example, hey, you have this handbag, you didn't buy it now and get 10% off.
Yeah.
That's not
handing
couponing,
cash.
That's a value prop that I think a consumer can understand. Wow, I got this very targeted ad to me on something that I didn't buy, but I get something out of it. I save 10% on the purchase. And maybe that is enough to educate the consumer, well, this is actually valuable. And the challenge there is educating the brand. I mean, they're probably going to be resistant to do that. How do you actually implement it? How do you do the promo codes and all the technical implementations? But I think if you got around that, it could be one simple step in providing value.
It seems like a really poor value exchange, though. I mean, because what we're talking about here really is give us your information and you'll get a better ad. And I'm not against ads. But when it comes to we could do something better with it later, that's a promise that, it's going to be hard for me to give my data over. I mean, the example that I have I don't deal with anonymous data. So one of the clients that we have actually has a physical location that's fairly large. It's I'm just going to say it's an amusement park. We have a whole bunch of them. But the idea here is that we can actually provide value. I mean, it's going to be in the form of mobile, specifically an app. But as people go throughout the park and engage in different experiences, we have through a Shopkick. Is everybody familiar with Shopkick here? Shopkick. Yeah. So you go in and through your device, it's high-frequency signal, and it recognizes where you are. So as you walk in, you automatically get stuff. You don't have to scan or any of that other stuff. But what's interesting is that we can create games within the park that makes the park even more interesting just to be there, not necessarily for the rides themselves. And that's the kind of utility that we're hoping to give to people so that they have the kind of experience that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think we end up painting ourselves into a corner when we think data automatically makes most of us think data, ads. Use the data to sell the ads, but personally, when I think of it more, use the data to create the experience. And I think we're starting to see, with brands acting more like publishers, we're starting to see more a shift, a slow but steady shift towards a mentality of understanding that, content, that customized content versus an ad can be more effective towards the same end goal. So as opposed to serving me a banner ad, serving me a slightly modified homepage with some kind of offer or incentive embedded into that.
I think the challenge there, and I'm not a naysayer, and I agree with you 100%. I'd love to get away from 300 by 250, 720 by 90s, and 160 by 600s. But the reality is when you're kind of providing, you're a company like us, and you got there's some standards, and unfortunately, those three standards are very easy. We can fit things very easily in. And the marketer can, and the agency can do it. So I think that's the challenge, and just like we were saying, break the publishers of the habit of serving an ad if they don't really have one that they can monetize effectively. I think we have a little bit of comfort being in that sort of standardized realm of these are the three ad sizes that most websites display, and I just got to get those from the agency or the marketer, and that's what I'm confined to. I agree, breaking out of that would be great. I just think it's going to be very hard to do. and create real
Well,
experiences.
but not
Last
necessarily
word.
breaking out of that too, but also as ads become more richer, as ad formats become more engaging. I mean, specifically, I'm always thinking, mobile and tablet, but for the desktop as well. As I think maybe the goal is for the advertising to become indistinguishable from the content, because that's what people are really after, right? Is
I
the
agree.
content. So if the ad, if I don't, ideally, I shouldn't know it's an ad, right? I should think, oh, it's some great content, some great offer for me.
So I'm just gonna. I want to have time for Q&A, and we only have 10 minutes left. So I'm just gonna put a point on top of that to tee up Q&A, and basically state that if we want the experience, the advertising to be such an experience that it isn't necessarily in an IAB standard size, I think that is ideal, but almost a headache of impossibility to slot, right, across the web. But I don't think that ads necessarily need to be static banners with a call to action. So ads themselves can be a reward. So I'll leave us with sort of, I think we'd all agree, synthesizing everything that people said in the panel. We started with talking about data creating a customized experience. But I would argue, and I think that other people have reflected this on the panel, that the customized experience isn't just like a color that they think you as your gender prefers, or maybe a handbag that you liked before. It's really adding value to you in some way. So the experience is either in the form of a financial reward, that 10% off the handbag, or I used an example, but I'm sure many people have them, of actually using data to give you a pat on the back and show you an achievement. I know that weight loss brands have a wonderful, wonderful success at demonstrating this. And then there's also ways to reward people with fun. So I think that Killian's experience of that experience being ingrained in something that they already enjoy, if they're getting a benefit while waiting in line at golf or at some amusement park. I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. So I think we've figured out how not to be creepy and how to make consumers love it. And on that note, and apologies, Steve, with only 7 minutes left, I would love to open it up for any Q&A. And if you don't have any questions, we know who we're going to next. Josh. There's someone right here in the front.
Hi, Sophie from Huge once again. Question about, I heard the creep factor coming up a lot, like during the day, and I wonder if anyone is actually measuring what that creep factor does to your brand, because we're trying so hard, or advertisers are trying so hard to get better with the consumer and learn more about them and be more targeted, but then when it comes to your wife, it's the opposite. So are we measuring enough what that does, and are we experimenting on a level that is just going to shoot ourselves in the foot? I.e. target.
A new metric, wow, the creep factor.
We've got enough measurements.
Yeah.
Track down everyone who's seen the ad and ask them if they were creeped out.
We have a survey that says, was this ad creepy? No, we haven't. I mean, honestly, I'd love to say that it was something that we've tracked, but it's more anecdotal. So you'll find when you work with a brand, if you'll basically judge usually by them, or maybe running an ad that might, like a very targeted ad, a very dynamic ad that has something like a handbag that you saw on there, or put in your shopping cart. The brand will usually get the feedback, and again, it's more anecdotal. And some brands have more of a threshold for that. They get one complaint and, you got to take down this ad, it's too creepy. Or others, I think they see the value in it, so they might get a couple people like, that's not great experience, but I think for the most part, the anecdotal experience it's turned out to be pretty good for us. I mean, we run ads, dynamic ads for users that have a lot of, I think, very good content in it, and we haven't had too many problems with other brands or consumers complaining to the brands.
I think to Duncan's point, I mean, working in advertising, it doesn't take long. If something is not resonating or offending the general public, it's not long before we find out, right? I mean, there's plenty of examples of that. Right. So, I mean, the lack of that happening sort of makes your point, I think, Duncan. I mean, I don't think everybody's ready to just hand over their data and please stalk the hell out of me on the internet. But, I mean, I'm surprised that there isn't more difficulty with it. But it sort of gives me a green light.
I was going to
Here
say.
we go.
Yeah,
There's your answer.
Low click rates, I don't know.
Lower opt-out rates.
Right.
And if you look at email marketing, right, people do measure the opt-out rate from an email list as a negative success metric. And for banners, we see that for the ads, even when we put now the power icon to give people the ability to opt out from that ad, the opt-out rates are not that high. I don't think it's a endemic problem, to your point.
Yeah, it's the opposite. I think the click-through rates are higher in those ads, so people are engaging more with them. I don't think they're engaging with them because they think they're creepy. I think they find some value in it. So at least that's maybe an indicator of it working.
It'd be interesting to look at as sort of data techniques, especially specifically digital ones, change over time. Do sort of a longitudinal study to see, over a large panel, how many people were creeped, if the creep factor or the index, the creepy index raised over time. How many times a month are you startled by how much ones and zeros know about you, wherever you are.
I'm constantly startled every month by how crap the ads are and how little people know about me, to be honest.
Bring it on.
Perpetually startled. I mean, the hours that we've all sat through of marketing online, if you added that up, it's more than you've ever sat through in TV commercials. And yet, it's the same point we've been making. I think there's a tremendous room for improvement there.
So I wonder how much people, I think there's a fine line maybe between, or maybe not so fine line between the creep factor and the offense factor. Because if a brand does something that's truly intrusive, offensive, or just plain wrong, we'll hear it, within hours all over the web. So I just have to wonder how much people really feel compelled to complain about being creeped out.
People have a higher tolerance for creepy?
Yeah. Maybe.
It's the index. It's the index.
We need to invent a Twitter hashtag for people who've been creeped out, and then
I'm sure there is
set it
one.
up.
Cool. Well, I think on that note, we're done. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Val. Thanks, Alexa. Thank you.